Okay, so great. So that was the thank yous from our part. Again, thank you to the Caribbean Studies program, all of the contributors from Caribbean Studies, those that are enrolled in the program as part of their degree, but many of you as well that you've taken Caribbean Studies courses and produced incredible work. And we're very grateful to have crossed paths with you. And we have this as a reminder of all the great work that students are doing in Caribbean Studies. So thank you all, and thank you to the New College Initiatives Fund. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to pass it over to David and Correa. I believe you are the two representatives on the call right now from the editorial team. If you just wanted to give an introduction and say some words, and then after that, we're going to pass it on along to Teray and Alyssa from CARSSU. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Kevin. Yeah, this journal this year has been great to do along with the editorial team. Ended up being the largest volume to date and the only one since volume 2 in 2011, 2012 to have a multi-issue volume. So we're really excited about the scope of scholarship that people were willing to contribute this year. And it's really made for a great 2 cohesive kind of issue pieces. I'll leave a little bit more space for contributors to talk a bit about their research, but there's a lot of exciting pieces in here. We have some pieces from folks overseas as well. So it's been able to make a really comprehensive piece of work that I think, like Kevin is saying, about folks kind of being able to see through Google Scholar and other search engines work that's being produced in the region. I think these are great additions to that scholarship, and they'll be going up on the journal website shortly. Yeah, so I keep thinking about things to say, and then I say, like, I don't want to say too much of what others might say about their pieces specifically, but I'm really looking forward to them being able to share that with you folks, and for everyone to get a chance to go through the work. I don't know if Cordy wants to add something as well. Oh, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to David and Kevin for really just bringing me on. It was pretty last minute, but it was like very exciting, and I learned a lot. As someone who wasn't a Caribbean student, a Caribbean studies student at U of T, was very informative for my own scholarship, and just learning the different perspectives on things that are happening in the Caribbean region, the artwork and the poetry that was involved, and the analysis, whether it was like book reviews or policy reviews and stuff like that. It was just really informative to me personally. So I really enjoyed reading them and editing them. And I guess, yeah, this was just a great experience altogether. And I'm really looking forward to doing the next one with the Caribbean Studies Department. I think that's very exciting. And just as a side note, when you do end up reading your pieces, if you haven't yet, if you've seen that I cut your bio in half, it's not because your life isn't important and what you've done isn't important. We just had some spatial constraints. So apologies if your volunteer work was cut from the chopping block. But thank you again. This is really cool. Unfortunately, I do have class, so I will be leaving at 3:30, but I'm happy to be here and see so many people here to celebrate the scholarship that we put together. So thank you.
Great, thank you both. And I just wanted to double check. Most of you were on the initial email chain where I had sent out the electronic copies. I just wanted to see if anyone else was missing one of these, the electronic versions. So if you did need it, I can just drop it for everyone in the chat if that makes sense. Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, I wanted to pass it over now to Teray and Alyssa to speak on behalf of CARSSU.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Teray, and I'm one of the Caribbean Studies Student Union's co-president for this school year. Firstly, before I start, I just want to say thank you to the Caribbean Quilt and Professor Edmonds for giving us some airtime. And I'm going to try to be quick because now I'm like really excited for all the presentations. So yeah, huge congrats on your launch. So firstly, I'm just going to briefly share what CARSSU is, what's been done in the past, and what we look to do in the future, and hopefully get some of you eager enough that you want to join us. So CARSSU is a union for undergraduate students studying like majors, minors, specialties, etc. And we're advocates for the academic development and representation as it relates to the Caribbean region and also people, which is ever important in a Eurocentric institution that prioritizes certain modes of scholarship. So for CARSSU, knowledge sharing and power sharing is really important to us. And this is like things that Alyssa and I hope to expand in the future. And because this year has been like full of transition, you can expect a lot more activity from CARSSU in the next year. And this is kind of bittersweet because it's like delayed, but I think it's a little more positive because now we have the opportunity to reach more people and hopefully get more people involved in the wonderful things that CARSSU is going to do in the future. I'm going to pass it over to Alyssa now to kind of discuss what those opportunities are. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Alyssa, and I'm going to drop an email in the chat box if I have that option, just so if you guys have any like concerns or questions about CARSSU, you can reach out to us. That's it from me, and over to you, Alyssa.
Thank you so much, Tarai. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd also like to extend my thank yous to the editorial team as well as Kevin for organizing today's event. So like I said, I'm Alyssa. I'm one of the current co-presidents of CARSSU. And as it is right now, we have some vacancies in the positions at CARSSU that we hope to fill. So I'm just going to brief you guys really quickly on the positions that we have available. The first one is the Director of Media and Design. So if you have a knack for social media and you're really good with engagement, this position would be great for you. You know, this is just to help us curate content for promotional and informational activities that we have at CARSSU. The next position is the External Affairs and Events Coordinator. So this person is more so to maintain communication between CARSSU and any external organizations in the GTA and beyond. And basically this person kind of keeps their ears to the community and informs CARSSU of any events or activities that might be of interest. The next and final position that we have is the Director of Communications and Public Relations. So if you find yourself to be a sociable person and you're really great at networking, this position would be great for you. This is kind of how we expand our reach to other members in the program and at U of T that might be interested in CARSSU. So that's essentially the essence of the 3 positions that we have available. I don't want to take up too much time, but yes, if you are interested, you can send a personal statement along with your resume to the email I believe that Tarai dropped in the comments. And thank you guys so much for your time.
Great. Thank you both, Alyssa and Tarai, for the introduction to CARSSU and the reminder of the positions that are open. So this is great to be involved with CARSSU, and also wanted to give another shout out to David, who has been really involved in the program this year and has helped. I've honestly been blown away by working with David, not just David, but for his work in terms of leaving like a foundation for us to build on. And with this journal in particular, he's put in so much work in terms of making sure one of the priorities was to make sure that future years that students coming in, that there's going to be a lot of resources and guides set up for them. So David has been really doing a lot of overtime in terms of this like institutional building. So a big thank you as well. And I also wanted to say a shout out to Prilly, who is on the editorial team as well. And she is giving birth soon, so that's why she's not on the call. So this is something that is happening relatively soon. We haven't heard back, so that might be happening right now. So we'll see what happens, if the baby will be named Caribbean Quilt or something like that. But what we have planned now is just for the students to actually give a brief presentation on their work. So what we can do is, as I mentioned before in the emails to the contributors, is that this is not super formal. This is a way just for us to kind of share our work, and also for me to share my appreciation of you and all the hard work that you've done. So please do not have any jitters or nerves about your presentations. You've all put together incredible contributions. And I mentioned that it's going to be anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes where you tell us about your work, some of the key insights or takeaways from your research and where your article was. And also just wanted to flag that not everything actually was an academic research paper, that we did have poetry contributions as well, and more reflective creative writing pieces as well. So just a shout out for people that are thinking of contributing next year. And we're going to conclude with this, but it's also something to think about. We're trying to demonstrate the breadth and creativity of Caribbean studies students as well. So it's not just research papers or those kinds of things that we find in the journal, even though there is a lot, but poetry is definitely a part of this. So there's going to be the presentations, and then we're also going to leave a space for us to ask questions and also to provide any comments as well. So within that 5 to 10 minute frame, we do have our 6 speakers. So we're going to go in order based off of the email. So we have Amna, who will be presenting first, all the way from the United Kingdom. So welcome, Amna. Thank you.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Amna. I'm a religion, politics and society student at King's College London, and I wrote my paper, The Reality of Reparations, whilst I was on a virtual study abroad semester at University of Toronto last year. So with COVID, I wasn't able to come, so I did it all virtually, which in itself was a really interesting experience. But writing this paper and having it published in Caribbean Quilt was definitely a highlight of that. So yeah, my paper is called The Reality of Reparations, and it's about reparations, which are compensations which happen to the different Caribbean nation states because of slavery. The way I wrote my paper is I split it into 3 different sections. The first being, oh, sorry about that, the email noise. The first being why do reparations need to be paid, then why are they not being paid, and then finally what needs to change. So in the paper that I wrote, there was definitely a really big economic focus on neo-colonial economics and the unsettling economic philosophies which did base slavery and made most of the people at that time think it was okay. But I think a really important point I made in my paper was also about how compensation needs to be made for the erasure of like cultural heritage and that sort of thing, like language, space, architecture, all these things which are overlooked. That's the essence of my article. I hope that everyone reads it and enjoys reading it. And then in conclusion of what I found, I said that from the different things that I looked at, that the general rejection of and like limitations within reparations discourse at the moment, they're based in, well, my opinion at least, is they're based in how our current systems of dominance and power are really, really entrenched in colonial systems. And so hopefully in reading this essay, people will think about how we can remove ourselves from that in the what needs to change. Yeah.
Great. No, thank you, Amna, for your presentation. And it was unfortunate that we weren't able to obviously have these in-person classes, but it's great to actually be able to connect again. And also how you raised a lot of really insightful points about reparations as a discourse, but also how it's been framed as like a developmental tool as well. And in some relatively uncritical ways, which I think was really important that you pushed back against that. So and that was for the Caribbean political thought class, I believe, right? So yeah, so that was great to have you in that class. So I just wanted to open it up. There's definitely some people that are in the chat making these points, but if anyone wants to ask Amna any questions about the piece or the debate going on, or even Barbados trying to outshine Caribbean Quilts with their Republic Day events happening, which I was thinking of this morning when I had your piece, just reviewing it, that I was like, okay, this is great. It's very timely, very topical.
Yeah, because right before I joined this Zoom meeting, I was reading about it, about how they're the first nation in like 30 years to do it after so much activism from last year and then pushes from the government about 20 years ago. So yeah, it's definitely really interesting and timely.
Definitely. So these debates that students are writing on are really, really timely. They speak to a lot of the contemporary events that are happening here. And I believe that, people will, when they search, once we get this online really soon, that your name will pop up. And this is something that I'm always really happy to see, that when we're looking for gaps in the literature and trying, I see students' names pop up in Google search. It's like one of the, maybe it speaks to how my experience is becoming too academic, but that makes me really excited, to see the students' works pop up in these kinds of searches. So thank you, Amna, as well for your presentation. We realized the time change, the difference, you know, it's late there, but we just wanted to say thank you as well for joining us.
Thank you.
So if there's any other comments, I'll just give it a couple seconds for people if they wanted to drop something in the chat or to ask directly or put up your hand. If not, we will have Akshay join us and give the presentation next. Thank you.
Hi, yeah. So my name's Akshay. I am in third year now, and I originally wrote this essay last year for a course that I took with Melanie Newton, Professor Melanie Newton at the University of Toronto in the Caribbean Studies Department, who is absolutely fantastic and definitely, you know, one of my favorite courses and most comprehensive courses I've taken so far. And I was kind of inspired by some of the peripheral material that we covered throughout the course, which was generally focusing on this idea of how exchange was facilitated within Indigenous societies, and particularly the way that that impacted how colonial and Indigenous trade developed. And so my paper is entitled Exoticism, Exchange in Early Indigenous Colonial Relations in the 15th and 16th century, or 15th and 16th century Caribbean. And generally, yeah, it was attempting to explore how we have this conception that you know, the paradigm of trade was really initiated by colonial frameworks, i.e., you know, kind of this liberal or mercantilist perception of trade. And I was kind of attempting to demonstrate how not only was the way that trade developed and relations between these two societies developed, it wasn't really as you know, unilateral as many historical records have shown, and it wasn't as dominant by the colonists, but it actually occurred in sort of a milieu of you know, differentiated perceptions of interaction and exchange. And so one of sort of like the main thrust of my article was to demonstrate that, you know, colonists very much entered into an existing expansive network of trade, and they were informed by the cultural norms that were present there, but they also then exploited those cultural norms in a way that allowed them to consolidate political power and to achieve significant advantages in trade and sort of secure this colonizing force as an ideological project. And so I think, yeah, one of the things that I really just did find most fascinating about all of this is that, you know, we have at least, you know, this image passed down by colonial historians that colonists came to the Americas and they purchased these vast tracts of land with, you know, baubles essentially and simple cheap goods, and that indigenous peoples there were so primitive that they were pacified by these simple goods, right? Essentially, they had no ability to understand their true worth. And it's this image of exploitation that's really been transposed across generations. And one of the most interesting things about this for me was that many indigenous peoples, in engaging with this kind of trade and accepting what the Europeans saw as baubles, it wasn't as much indicative of them evaluating the economic value of these objects, but the social value and the way that incorporating foreign objects into their own cultures could serve as a means of social expansion and consolidation. And so, yeah, it was just a really interesting project to explore the differentiated perspectives on historical relations and the things that aren't often covered. And so, yeah, you know, that's essentially the gist of everything I did. Again, you know, huge shout out to Melanie Newton, because couldn't have done it without her. And she provides such fantastic insights throughout the entire project to kind of, you know, guide and formulate what my idea was around this.
Definitely. Thank you, Akshay, for that great summary of your article. And thank you to David for also dropping those versions, the electronic versions, into the chat. For those of you that didn't get a chance to see the electronic copy, it's there. There are some if you do see anything that needs editing, please send me an email about that so we can catch it. But no, thank you, Akshay, for your you know, really, really great presentation. Are there any questions for Akshay in terms of the work, or if you want to plug the course or ask about it? Like, this is a chance for all of us within this little community to get to know each other a bit more. So please definitely do not be shy. It's a way to spare you all from hearing me constantly. But did you want to tell us that I'm curious about the approach that Professor Newton takes in the indigeneity and the Caribbean class compared to what you see out there. Like you talked about these more dominant critiques or narratives that are there, like how the class kind of pushed back against them. If you wanted to speak a bit to that, because it comes out in your paper. I like how you talked about them coming. There's pre-existing networks which they exploited, which is good because they tend to talk about it as if it was, a blank slate where they were able to do whatever they wanted.
Absolutely. Yeah, a few people are asking in the comments here that the course code was HIS 230H1. I'm trying to recall the name of it. I believe it's pre-colonial and early colonial Caribbean history. I'm not sure exactly, but the course code is HIS 230H1. I'll put it quickly in the chat. Again, highly recommend. And yeah, what I really liked about Professor Newton's approach was that we took Caribbean history from a very early standpoint, and we adopted more of an archaeological rather than historical approach, because something that we found throughout the course was that history and the records of historians have fallen far behind what archaeologists and anthropologists have been doing in their work. And so something that we kind of studied was, again, countering this notion of the blank slate or whatever that existed prior to colonial arrival, depicting that there was a vast network of relations, social relations and political constructions that existed before then, and then looking at the way that informed colonial relations. So something that I think we explored as early as 3000 or 5000 BC in terms of what was accessible records. And we looked at the way that migration patterns occurred and the kind of technologies that had been developed. And then that helped us to kind of push back against some of the colonial notions of what technologies and what advancements had occurred before their arrival. And I think a common perception, at least that I can recall among colonists, was that their methods of transportation were quite primitive, indigenous methods of transportation, when really something that we explored in the course was that they had quite advanced means of transportation through these vast, these very large kayaks and canoes. And it essentially allowed them to travel over vast distances and engage in trade from, as far as the tip of Southern America all the way up to, around what we now call North America or the US. So yeah, I think what I really appreciated about the course was that it was all, we explored a little bit of the colonial arrival and how those relations initiated, but it was all within the context of so much rich history that preceded it. And so, yeah, again, I highly recommend it. She's a wealth of knowledge, and yeah, you can really ask her anything about the Caribbean. She always has a great answer.
No, I agree. Thank you, Akshay, again for that. And also just to hear the impact, but also to have such insightful students like yourself. This is the reward of being, an educator, right? So this is really inspiring to hear the terms as well that Professor Newton would use in the class and hear them come through and influencing your work. I think is great. And also, again, shout out to Professor Newton in the context of Republic Day in Barbados, that I keep opening news stories and I keep seeing her name as one of the contributors. But definitely, I really appreciate that, and for letting us also know a bit more as well about the course to allow students that are taking a Caribbean Studies degree that there are a number of other options aside from just the core courses, and this is one of them. So you're able to gain a more well-rounded understanding of the region. So thank you actually for your presentation and sharing all of that with us. So next we have Stefan, who is the author of, I believe, 3 articles in the journal. I think that might be the record for now, but this was incredible. So I can't see exactly if Stefan is with us at this moment. Can you hear me, Stefan? Okay, great.
Yeah,
okay,
I can
great.
hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, so my name is Stefan, not Paul. I'm on my father's laptop right now. Sorry about that. I just want to first thank the Caribbean Studies program at the University of Toronto for welcoming me here, and all the work that the program does to has done to make this event happen. So just a little bit about me. I'm a graduate of the University of Toronto with a bachelor in music and a minor in history. And I'm now attending Osgoode Hall Law School. So kind of, thank you. All over the place. So I guess what got me thinking to contribute to this journal was my good friend, David Allens, who's here. I'm gonna thank him once more for reaching out to me about it. And I had taken a few courses with Professor Newton, actually the same one, His 230, same one that actually took excellent course, excellent professor. I agree. And with Professor Espaillat Lizardo as well. I'm not sure if a few people in here might have taken a course with her. It was specifically His 231, I believe, if I can remember, if my memory recalls, Emancipation and Revolution in the Colonial Caribbean. And that was also just a fantastic course. So, I guess that's just to say that I like to dip my feet in different areas, have many interests, and also stay true to my Jamaican roots. So yeah, 3 articles I have, both with those courses that I just stated. So 2 of them are in the first issue called Resiliency, and then one is in issue 2, which is Revolution. Okay. The story of resiliency and revolution is a story about a drive so powerful among the oppressed to break the bonds of suffering and sacrifice the present for a liberated future. But narrating the story of the oppressed as one of triumph over extreme hardship seems to be analogous to lauding political historical figures, as we often do, for their achievements. There is no heroism here, as the forces which led these historical actors to leave a significant legacy are complex. This complexity and the forces at play is elucidated in my article, Kalinago-European Alliances in the 17th Century Caribbean, Wavering Between Empire and Decolonization. Thomas Indian Warner, as described in the literature, was a man of mixed Indigenous and English descent who was said to have brokered peace between the Kalinago, an Indigenous people of the Lesser Antilles in the Caribbean, and the Europeans. The available research on his life indicates that his alliances with these constituencies were often ambiguous and shifting due to the weight of his internal desires as grounded in his racial identity, as well as the influence of external power relations. We cannot properly understand the efforts of Indigenous peoples to resist control if the complex history of the individuals who negotiated with, between, and on behalf of Indigenous peoples is not critically examined. Much of the inner lining of Kalinago-European colonial relations is fleshed out by historical actors like Thomas Indian Warner, who navigated the interstices of Indigenous autonomy and European power. And so I ask you, what future could we imagine if we judged presumably admirable individuals in history as flawed beings like the rest of us? On the other hand, what if we treated presumably flawed beings as admirable individuals? In my article, Recreating Collective Memories of Africa in the Afro-Caribbean Diaspora, Spiritual Resistance in Cuban Santeria and Haitian Voodoo, I discuss how Afro-Caribbean slaves used Haitian Voodoo and Cuban Santeria as a form of religious and musical expression to combat the strains of European rule and undermine the prevailing social order. In the religious context, while faith in Roman Catholicism was imposed on slaves throughout the Americas, they often worshiped their own gods, and in doing so secretly subverted the original intention of the colonizers' religion. In the musical context, drumming encouraged the enslaved to embrace their common African identity as a tool to resist colonial rule. Since the Afro-Caribbean religious and musical practices existed in a spiritual realm that was largely inaccessible to the Europeans, their recreation of Africa in their collective consciousness was never entirely severed. In fact, it only grew stronger. Perhaps recognizing that the unorthodox modes of resistance that Afro-Caribbean slaves took up is worthy of our admiration is a step forward, but this perspective is heavily gendered. The assumption is that these were male Afro-Caribbean slaves. In my article, Contemplating the Afterlife of Slavery, Gynecological Resistance, Marriage, and Revolution in Late 18th Century Saint-Domingue, I show the ways in which enslaved women, specifically enslaved expectant mothers, forcefully resisted against the slave regime. As the most oppressed population under the regime, the deliberate actions they pursued towards freedom contributed greatly to the emergence of the first Black Republic, which spawned out of the Haitian Revolution. If we are to appreciate the significance of enslaved women's resistance, we must rid ourselves of the notion that enslaved women did not have the time, skill, or willingness to attempt to free themselves and their children from the shackles of slavery. Importantly, historical actors who are often silenced were some of the greatest agents of change and justice in the modern era. Women Afro-Caribbean slaves exercised their agency, and they were quite aware of what they were doing. I endeavor to allow you to see the complex historical, political, and sociocultural forces at play in resiliency and revolution. This includes analyzing these processes from multiple and often diverging angles: the individual versus the collective, the oppressed versus the oppressor, resistance as heteronormative versus resistance as gendered. The more angles there are to interpret how resiliency and revolution unfold and intersect, the richer our understanding of our own humanity will become. Thank you for listening to my presentation. And just as an aside, if anyone's here is thinking of going to law school, please feel free to reach out to me.
Oh, thank you much, Stefan, for the synthesis of those the 3 articles in one presentation. It is a feat on its own to be able to do that. And thank you for your enthusiasm in contributing to the journal. And also, yeah, I had been talking to Stefan as well online through email, because I despite teaching so many courses, I actually had not met Stefan. So this was great. And I was saying that I was learning about going to law school. That's incredible. And I said, this is something that we should really highlight, because I think, again, your generous offer of letting students get in touch with you to ask questions. I think that's a big thing that students have mentioned to me, is like, I love Caribbean studies for what it is and it represents, and what I learn, and the questions that I can ask, and conversations I can have now, and the understanding of myself and my family, or even just from a broader general interest. But there's also that idea or kind of hesitation that some students have about, is this transferable to other fields? And I think having you as a student going to law school really shows how well-rounded and really skilled the students are that are coming out of this program. So thank you very, very much for that. And I just wanted to open it up again for anyone else that has any questions or comments about these really insightful articles that Stefan has presented for us.
Well, just sorry, a quick note before we go to someone else or anyone else. There's actually a tie for 3 pieces. Kennedy
Okay. Who is there with the third? Is there
Kennedy has 3.
Kennedy? Okay. All right.
I low-key also do.
You have 3 as well? I thought you had 2.
Yeah.
Okay. So now everyone's jumping on. Okay, this is seeming more and more like class, that everyone's calling Kevin out for his mistakes. But this is great. No. Okay, so there is a tie for 3. We're gonna see who can break that with the next edition then. Okay. but no, thank you. So there is a question in the chat, Stefan, from Tara, if you can see that one.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the question, Tara. Like I'm not 100% sure still, if I'm going to be honest with you, like what type of law. I think like near the end of my undergraduate degree, I was getting really into social justice efforts and initiatives on campus, in student clubs, in committees, stuff like that. And so, I mean, right now it's like ending the end of, or nearing the end of the like semester for everyone. But I say that because like I've only so far gotten a grasp of like, what law school is like, what the courses are like, and my interests there, and like some kind of subjects that I didn't see myself interested in necessarily, like I am. But for the moment, I would say I'm more interested in human rights law. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. And I also think it's wonderful that you're keeping open to see, where your interests take you, because being surprised is always an exciting part of being at school.
Oh, thank you. Just saw the comment that went in the chat. No, thank you, Tara, for that, as well as the update from Alyssa, or Professor Trotz, here in terms of some updates on alumni. So this is great. So this is something that, yeah, we are also working on as a program, is to profile some of our recent alumni, and also to let other students know and connect them with alumni from years back. And because there is a connection that students want to exchange and also learn from each other, right? So this is great. So I really appreciate that, and also for Stefan being so forthcoming with this, right? That's something in terms of potentially being a mentor for others down the road. So this is great, and it speaks to the small but mighty community that we have here. So I am gonna ask Rochelle. I saw that you are here. You have your 3 articles. So sorry
Yeah.
that I was thinking that it was 2. So I'm glad that you corrected me before
No
I introduced you as
problem.
the author with 2. But I also wanted to shout you out as someone who might have taken many Caribbean studies courses, but just fell shy of taking the minor. But no,
100%.
you're there.
That's exactly what happened. Unfortunately, I didn't make the minor because I graduated last week, 2 weeks ago. Thank you. But yeah, I took a lot of Kevin's courses, and I will 100% plug all of them. They were amazing. I really enjoyed them. I can't say that enough. But I also took Professor Ramsaroop's class in the summer too. It was Caribbean Foodways that Kevin recommended, and I also really enjoyed that class too. I learned a lot throughout my last probably 2 semesters about the Caribbean in general. I am Guyanese, well, my family is, so it's something that's really near and dear to my heart, all of these courses. So the 3 articles that were chosen to be included in these issues have a very large arts-based themed. So the first one being an analysis of a performance art piece. The second being the influence of Afro-Caribbean and Indigenous visual art pieces, with a kind of a little bit of a point of the lack of Indo-Caribbean pieces that are there historically. Right now, presently, there are some Indo-Caribbean artists that are really highlighting stories of Indian indentureship, which is really cool to see. And my last piece is probably the one that I was most excited about because it was the influence of dancehall and reggae on Jamaican politics. So historically up till today, that went through the whole Bob Marley to Beanie Man, to, if you want to do the Gully Gaza, so vibes in Movado there, in kind of the influence that music has in our culture too as Caribbean people. I thought that was really important to highlight. So if you guys are interested in it, I have a love for art and anything to do with music, performance, visual, but also a really big highlight on Caribbean. So that's why I merged those two loves together throughout the courses that I took over the last 2 semesters of my university career. But yeah, that's just a little bit about what I did.
Oh, thank you very much, Rochelle. And I remember one of the early times when we talked, you had told me that you were in Canadian studies, correct?
I am. I graduated with a specialist in Canadian studies.
Oh, and that's amazing. But I remember you told me that there was the project that you were working on, the final project.
I am still actually working on it. So that was like an independent project that I kind of took on myself, where I was trying to get my own research on Indo-Caribbean immigration to Canada, but specifically Guyanese Indian immigration during the times pretty much when the first Trudeau, so Pierre Trudeau, allowed immigration to open up in Toronto. So a focus on that and why people chose Toronto, what their experience was like, and all of that. I'm actually still in the process of working through those. I had about 150 submissions of family stories. So that was just through my grandparents and my mom and like my resources, but I would like to kind of expand that further. I'm trying to still figure out how I'm going to do that though.
Oh, and that's just something I wanted to say. Don't forget about the journal in the program once you conclude, or not conclude, but once that project takes shape, because I know that it's something that you're looking at with like a longer term. So that's something that's really incredible. And I just wanted to highlight that and say thank you for that. There is also a question for you in the chat.
Oh, I am not an artist, unfortunately. Well, it depends on how you outline artist. I do like to write here and there, but professional or sharing with the world, no. Just for myself, yes.
I like how you phrase that. Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking forward to see what comes out of your research and all of the hard work that you've been doing on that side. And thank you for your enthusiasm as well within Caribbean studies and being in so many classes and really being such, not just a sponge for the information, but also bringing so many rich contributions to the classes. So I've appreciated that as well. All right. So okay, there is the tie, the 3 articles. We have Stefan, we have Rochelle, and we have Kennedy. So I also am keeping note of the time that some folks said that they were initially interested in doing a presentation as well, and then kind of walked it back. If folks are still interested, just send me a note in the chat, and I'd be happy to give time, open it up more. If you didn't come here prepared with anything but wanted to speak, we can make time for that before we move into the conclusion for the day. Okay, so I'm getting some hits on the chat as well, so that we can my subliminal message to Kennedy went through without saying her name. I guess I did. But we're gonna have the 3 contributors that did the 3 articles come through. So I'm glad to have that happen. So thank you, Kennedy, for volunteering as well. And thank you, Rochelle, for your contribution. So next on the list, I have Ruth. Ruth, are you there? Can you hear me? And then we have Katia and then Kennedy. So thank you, Ruth. I will pass it to you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you to everybody who came. Nice seeing all you. So I'm Ruth, and I'm a 4th year and, knock on wood, final year at U of T. I'm doing a double major in peace, conflict, and justice and diaspora and transnational studies with a minor in creative expression. Usually I need to use my inhaler after saying all that, but that's what I do at U of T. And I actually submitted 2 articles. I'm not in the top 3 club, but my 2 articles, one is called A Revolutionary Cuisine, Food, Liberation, and Cubanidad, which is Cuban identity. And the other one is Bodegas, Baseball, and Ballades, the democratization of Puerto Rican identity. These 2 are respectively the result of my work with Professor Garcia Dominguez and Professor Rodriguez, 2 classes I took last year that were amazing, and they were focused on the Hispanic Caribbean as well as Cuba specifically, and sort of the culture and revolution in Cuba. And these articles sort of answer the same question of what does it mean to do ordinary activities when you live in extraordinary times, in times of mass migration, times of radical transformation. And I sort of like to pay focus on the informal activities of life, these spaces that sort of operate outside of institutions, from humor to tourism to food, and sort of these everyday practices that actually serve as sites of identity formation and negotiation. And they have this double function because they do have the function of necessities, right? You need to eat, you usually do need to travel, whether that be walking to work or, flying somewhere. And these domains are very potent sites of bottom-up community building, because you don't necessarily need to be at the top levels of politics to be able to cook a meal. And when you do cook this meal, what you include or what you don't include is also a side of exclusion, inclusion. And I think this is especially important in instances when communities have been incapacitated politically, whether that be by a corrupt government or by, world organizations like the IMF and World Bank. So yeah, and I chose these 2 spaces because New York and Cuba both serve as these spaces of contradiction, in the sense you have, mass wealth and mass poverty, or you have a capitalist economy and a socialist political system. So these sites that don't necessarily make sense together, but they do exist, and sort of how you can participate. Every act is political when you are in these times, and how a joke can be a form of historiography, or how grocery shopping can be a way of reaffirming your identity and whatnot. So thank you so much to the Caribbean Quilt as well for giving me this opportunity. And thank you so much for everybody who's here. I will learn how to read just so that I can read all these articles. It's very great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for your presentations, and also for just for those of us that are in the audience as well. If you wanted to just let us know the names about, or the names of the classes that you took. So you mentioned the profs, but just if you want to shout out, if you remember. Okay, we're putting you on the spot, but no, and thank you as well.
So sorry. I was just
No
going
problem.
on the timetable right now, trying to remember. I know it all starts with car, so I was just gonna scroll through all of them and see. But yeah, I will put them in the chat for sure.
Okay, no, that's amazing. No, thank you so much, and appreciating you speaking to as well the courses that you've taken on, Hispanic speaking or Spanish speaking Caribbean, which is great. So we've had a breadth. We've had no one speak on the French Caribbean or the Dutch Caribbean. I guess we had Stefan talk about Haiti. So yeah, that's true. We are rounding the bases here, and just wanted to ask anyone if they had any comments or questions for Ruth in terms of the presentations, or if there's anything you wanted to drop in the chat as well. Or if there's any plans for some of you. I know that these papers that you've written, they're also building the scaffolding for some of you are looking to get involved in graduate work, and this is something that some of you have flagged, not necessarily those of you that are presenting now, but just overall. So I just wanted to also say, if anyone wants to speak about those points in general, that would be great. So I'm just scanning who is here, or who I can put on the spot as well. Okay. All right. So any questions for Ruth? Okay. Thank you for putting those in there. So there's JLN. So that's the Joint class. So it's culture and modernity in the Hispanic Caribbean and then advanced topics of Hispanic Caribbean. So thank you, Ruth, for sharing that and for highlighting those courses as well. So there's going to be other opportunities as well. You might remember Ruth from Diaspora Voices Conference, where Ruth was also presenting on Bodega. So Ruth has got the diasporic politics of the Hispanic Caribbean down. So no, thank you again for your contributions. This is great. We will switch over. Yeah, exactly. No, that was really well done. That's where, and I remember that I told Ruth that I have to learn how to do PowerPoint build up my skills, because Ruth was very, very sharp when it came to putting that together. But no, thank you, Ruth. See, you've left a mark on everyone.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad that all my bribes went through. So everyone compliment me, but thank you.
No, great work. Thank you again, Ruth, for your contributions, for the two of them, but as well as everything else that you do in terms of keeping us on point in the program. So with that, I will now shift to Katya. We have our, well, I guess from last year, the Senior Doctoral Fellow for Caribbean Studies. Contributed to the journal this year. Thank you so much, Katya.
Well, I thank you very much for giving me another possibility to to share my my research, because we were talking about that, finding ways to redo this and contribute a bit more. So exactly like Kevin said, what I contributed with a text that's called Linguistic Representations of Black Characters in Cuban Fiction of the New Millennium, a tale about continuity and subversion. And it's an article that's an adapted version of the talk I gave on May 5, 2021, a historical date for me. For the New College 2021 Senior Doctoral Fellow Speaker Series. And so you asked me if I would want to contribute also with, as a Senior Doctoral Fellow at that time. And of course I said yes, because it's another way, I think, to re-examine the feedback I received and try to integrate it. And I think it's a good way when you're because I'm writing a thesis that's called Linguistic Representations of Black Characters in Contemporary Cuban Fiction. And writing these articles is a way also to be able to reflect and more on the process. And so I really like that. Because sometimes you also have to be more concise, or you have to say, oh yeah, somebody talked to me about how can you integrate, for example, I think it's David Allens that sent me can you talk about the resilience aspect or this other aspect? So it forces you to also go back to your books and to, integrate these aspects that are very, very interesting. So I could just maybe give the abstract of it. So, okay, so did I say I was a PhD candidate in the Spanish and Portuguese department? I'm saying it now.
Yeah, that's good. We got it.
I'm saying it now just to contextualize. So I'm not like a New College student. I'm not like a Caribbean studies student, but I'm coming from another space. And because I'm working on Cuban literature, so as a former New College Senior Doctoral Fellow. So I'll just give this, okay, so the abstract, if scholarship has focused on the return to the stereotypical portrayals of Black characters during the 1990s, and now I'm talking about Cuba, of course, and that were common to the pre-revolutionary era, what had not yet been addressed is how differentiating linguistic traits or manner of speech have been used to represent Black characters in more recent Cuban fiction, a narrative strategy that goes back to colonial times. Apart from conveying authenticity, the famous Havana slang, when building fictional characters, such a literary device, I contend, was also a way to emphasize the island's socioeconomic and cultural decadence or involution during this decade, the 1990s, of economic upheaval. And the focus, let's say, on the talk was on the second decade of the new millennium, in which other voices, namely from the Caribbean region or more connected to the central region of the island, have emerged and imposed themselves in fiction, leading me to explore other levels of significance of this narrative strategy. And then it's what follows. It is a tale about continuity and subversion. So continuity is more in what was done in Cuban fiction during the 1990s, and that I found that was like retaken at a certain point, re-explored, and that drew also from realist costumbristas novels of the 19th century. The model of Cecilia Valdez from Cielo Villaverde is a perfect example. And the subversion aspect is relative to who is othered, and a certain move away from the stigmatization of Black speech as per se, and more as a sign of identity, of geographical pertinence, cultural pertinence, and everything. And in all the discourse of multi-Cubanidad, the thing that we are all Cuban, we're not the same, and that's good that way. If you want me like to see things more like in a positive instance. So as I wanted to specify, the article draws in part from a previous thesis chapter I wrote on the topic of these linguistic representations in Cuban fiction during this special period. Some important insight I received by author Urayoán Gutierrez when I was in Havana in December 2019, pre-COVID era, and in which we talked about his work El Rey de la Habana that I was analyzing at the time. And this is like the stepping stone, if we wish, to the rest of the article, who deals more to what extent these representations or more or less stigmatization of Black speech have been sustained in Cuban narrative in the new millennium, and their other levels of significance. And I also add that my preliminary conclusions in this latest thesis chapter are also contingent of having received books written by authors residing outside of Havana, and because that aspect of linguistic representations, the context of just talking about race relations in the island was a bit skipped by more Havana-centric narratives. So this is, so I talked, during that talk, I introduced some preliminary conclusions, and I'm gonna finish with that because I think the best thing is to maybe to contextualize more what I've just said is to read the article, right? So that's the thing. So I have summarized the significance of this narrative strategy of integrating Black speech in 3 instances. One as a signifier of socioeconomic, cultural, moral decay, as a marker of group identity, codes of conduct in poor and marginal neighborhoods, and just the fact of being Cuban, like a form of Cubanness. Being Cuban is a way of saying things that make you Cuban, and when you live in Oriente, or you live in La Habana, or you live in Cienfuegos, well, you don't always use the same terms, and that identifies you to a region and to a particular history, et cetera, et cetera. So as it's also, I'm exploring also the aspect that the way language is integrated is also a pretext to revisit the nation's history, colonial transaction, and the society it fostered, migrations, national symbols, archetypes, and stereotypes. So for the next episode, or to know a bit more, I welcome everyone to read the rest. So that's what I did, and I really liked very much participating in this edition of the Caribbean Quilt.
All right, I wanted to thank you for going out of your way to put forward a submission, because I know that you're very busy with your own work, right? So for you to join the community, and also to as a graduate student, to see the value and the importance of what the students are doing, the undergrad students are doing in terms of putting this on. I was just touched by that. I said, thank you, because I have met some graduate students in my time who would have been, oh, I'm too fancy for undergraduate journal. But I know, no, but I'm just saying that I appreciate that about you, that it's all about sharing and building community. So that was great to see that it's a place for everyone's work to go in. So that was something that I appreciate, and wanted to thank you for that, Katia. Aside from it just being a very incredible article, and we also do have the copy of your senior doctoral fellow talk that we still have to talk about putting it up in public. But no, it was a great talk. And
you know what? That talk, Kevin, I saw it by Googling.
Yeah.
I saw
I
it
don't know
on,
how it would have got up though. That's what was interesting.
I saw it on YouTube, and actually I was happy to see it, because at a certain point I was writing the article and I'm like, oh, what did I, like, how did I get to that conclusion? Because I just had the notes, and by looking back to it, I was like, oh, wow. Because you know, when you're talking and you're in the moment of inspiration, and then you have these ideas, and then like that helped me a lot. So that was really
okay.
cool.
Well, that's good to hear. Okay, so I'm glad that it worked out, that I didn't get in trouble for
No,
that.
you're not.
Thank you, Katia, so much for your contribution. So just quickly, if anyone has any questions, I'm just mindful of the time. If anyone wanted to jump in and ask any questions, either to put up your hand or anything, you can do that, or jump into the chat as well. So I'll just take a couple seconds, but if there are not any comments right away, I will ask Kennedy. Thank you for your contribution as well, Katia, and thank you, Kennedy, for also taking the opportunity to walk back that decision and rejoin us in terms of your presentation, because I was heartbroken when you pulled out of it.
Yeah, I initially did not prepare anything to present, and I'm still quite unprepared, but I can give you guys a synopsis of the 3 papers, just because, you know, the other Stefan and Rochelle gave their 3 papers. I would like to also share mine. Thank you for allowing me this platform to let my mind just go many different places. I currently am doing a double major in biology and health and disease with a minor in Caribbean studies. So I have one paper that kind of is combining all 3 of my degrees. That is one in resiliency. It's called early colonial Circum-Caribbean affected by and infected by colonialism and disease. So in all aspects of my degree, I always try to marry the different topics. And in Professor Newman's class, which Stefan and Akshay had also taken, His 230, in that course, I wrote on how colonialism shaped the infectious history and the geography of the Caribbean region in that way. Really interesting paper, you know, in the time of a global pandemic. The paper also speaks to epidemics that broke out during the early colonialism, Columbian exchange, for example, yaws and syphilis, as well as diseases carried by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, because the conditions were very favorable for the spread of disease and things like that. So I wanted to just touch on that. Yeah, when I had my my roommates like proofread the last version that Kevin sent me, they were like, I had never thought about that before. And like it's been said, but I think the way that I say it is a bit more specific, and coming from my scientific background, marrying the two disciplines, it's really, really, really interesting. So I'm really happy with that one. I actually tried, it's funny because I tried to just not publish that one like 3 times. Like you can ask David, there was like a back and forth. I was like, David, I don't want to do this. And he was like, no, do it. And I was like, okay. So yeah, I'm really glad that David and Kevin pushed me to share my thoughts on that. The next paper that I wrote about in Resiliency is the influence of American homogeny on revolutionary thought. I think for this paper and the next paper that I'm going to talk about, I drew a lot of my inspiration from quotes that I saw. So for this one, I saw this quote somewhere. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head where I originally saw it, but it said that when the US sneezes, the Caribbean catches a cold. And I was like, what does that mean exactly? So I kept like thinking about that and diving through, and I wanted to marry that with revolution, and try to also place it in a modern day current setting, where Black Lives Matter movements and all these things were occurring. So in this paper, I talk about how the Black Lives Matter movement in the US affected the Caribbean, and kind of restarted those discussions on police brutality, racism, and where we stand as a community, as a Black community in the Caribbean. Though these are topics that are never like stopped talking about, there are like periods of dormancy and stuff like that where it's not the forefront of our conversation. People will be like, oh gosh, we talk about that too much, or this and that. So I think it's really important to continue in a progressive path of social change, that we have these conversations, and also acknowledge that American influence and Western influence is unfortunately and will always be something that heavily influences us in the Caribbean. I also in that paper kind of compare older movements and revolutions. So I talk about Stonewall, very briefly, the Cold War, all those things, how that had helped start other revolutions in the Caribbean, not directly, but just by creating that revolutionary atmosphere and political climate in the world, it kind of got one foot in the door for Caribbean activists and revolutionists to, set the stage after being very much like on high alert after the Haitian Revolution and becoming the first Black nation. Very quickly, lastly, the last paper that I wrote is in Revolution, and that one is, one second. And that one is Democratic Socialism, a Solution to Colonial Tourism Structures. So that paper was also inspired by a quote that I saw. It was, the Caribbean is not a Disneyland dumping ground for first world entitlement. And I remember reading that quote like in February before I wrote that paper. And I was like, I feel like I know what this means, but I can't speak on it just yet. Like I can't repost it to my Instagram story just yet until I do the research behind it and like actually understand like what's happening. And I remember this was actually for Kevin's class. It was, let me get the course code for you guys. It was New 329 that I took in the winter on special topics in Caribbean studies. So Kevin really gave us the opportunity to really write on anything for our final papers. So I decided to take that quote and run with it. And in that paper, I propose, it's kind of controversial, I kind of propose using a democratic socialist way of government after the pandemic, because the pandemic did kind of make every Caribbean state very vulnerable to political action and political change and social change. I feel like now is the time. We're all at home, we're all paying attention, we're all eager for something new to happen. Like we're always on our toes with the COVID variants and all these things. So that paper really talks about how tourism negatively and positively affects the region, using Jamaica as the model and as the example, and just saying that, you know, a democratic socialist government could potentially, you know, be the way of the future if the entire Caribbean gets behind it, and if we work together with that and like really understand what that means. Obviously, that is probably not a reality, because we all know that the US and Canada and Europe specifically always bar every chance we get to, I apologize, to, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? To try a new form of government, a new way of government that they don't approve of. But it was a really interesting thought piece, and I really am privileged and honored that I was able to put out a paper like that in a very Eurocentric and, you know, not Caribbean, pro-Caribbean institution. So yeah, that's me. Thank you for letting me share.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Kennedy, for letting us know about the 3 submissions that you have, and also for doing that off the top of your head. That is very skilled to be able to do that, because I put you on the spot. So I appreciate that very, very much. So I'm just mindful of the time. We might go 3 minutes over. Is that okay with everyone? We have one more person I just wanted to share. So if there are any questions for Kennedy as well, you could drop them in the chat, or just raise your hand, or just vocalize it. Okay, so I'll just wait and see. Everyone's quiet today. It's the snow. It's terrorized everyone. Okay, so with that, I would just say the last presentation from the students will be from David, who is going to speak to his article, and then we're going to do the wrap up as well. All right, so David, over to you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, really quickly. So this paper that it's actually not a paper, it's a nonfiction narrative that I did based on the paper that I wrote in one of Kevin's classes, New 324. And the essay that I initially wrote was based on how industries in the Caribbean, specifically like the rice industry in Haiti, dairy in Jamaica, and bananas in the Eastern Caribbean were impacted negatively by these multinational corporations and supranational organizations like the IMF in Haiti, the World Bank in Jamaica, and the WTO in the Windward Islands. And so based on that story, I got in touch with someone that Kevin knew, actually, Gabriel Aladua, who was a banana farmer in St. Lucia. And we talked a bit about the challenges that led to him becoming a migrant worker coming to Canada, how the impact of the WTO and some other local challenges led to the collapse of the industry, and a bit about what he's doing here as a activist, as a part of helping those who have come to Canada under the seasonal agricultural worker program. I think it might be called something else now. The challenges that they face in an environment where you don't have too many rights or privileges, or for example, you come and work on a farm, and the farm who employs you has a lot of power in saying whether or not you stay on a work permit. If you are forced to go home, you live on the farm. So there's a lot of other contextual issues there. So the story is just about it was initially in 2 parts that I wrote as a part of a literary journalism class in St. Michael's from this visiting prof, Sam Tannenhouse. But yeah, it was initially a 2-part story, and it just talks about his life in St. Lucia, and now here. Yeah, quick synopsis.
No, but that was great, David, to see. That it's one of the very pieces that, like I said, that not everything is just a research paper. That in this one, I mean, there's research that informed it for sure on your part, and you've presented that work again at the conference and in some of the classes that I've had the chance to be with you in. But doing an interview, right, with Gabriel and being able to get his own words and his own experiences directly, I think that was really great, and it's a great contribution to the article. And it also just shows the different ways that students in the program are creating knowledge, because this is something that definitely people will be able to go and learn from. So with that, thank you, David, and if anyone has any questions about David or David's submission or presentation, please feel free to ask in the chat, or anyone. So if there's anything that's been said throughout the afternoon that people wanted to go back to, or to say anything to any of the presenters, I just wanted to thank you all for stepping up and informing us and letting us know and sharing your work with us. That was great. And I know it takes a lot to volunteer to do more work, especially sometimes when I just bother you off the top of my head. I say, go and present, and then you step up. So thank you again. It's a testament to the students and how not just resilient, we'll use that, because you've all made it through a really challenging few school years, right? So that this has all been the conversations that I have with you all during class or in office hours or just an email. I just wanted to congratulate you all for that, and actually for keeping this going, even though it took a little bit longer, but that it's part of the process, because there was so much enthusiasm from the students. We were kind of blown away. We were thinking, we were like, oh, if we can get 12 articles, then we've really got it. And then we ended up with like 35, 36. So that obviously made us had to pivot. So shout out to David and the editorial team again for managing that deluge of articles that all of a sudden hit us in the middle of the summer when we thought we had things planned out. So no, it's great. And again, they've done an incredible job with the journal, and this is really great. And thank you as well, Professor Rodriguez, for the support of the program as well. So did you want to say anything? I'm putting you on the spot as well. See, I'm equal opportunity with this. I'm not just going after the students.
Hi, Kevin. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but I mean, now that you throw me to the lions, I have to. No, I'm just very, very happy to see this project made it this far. I mean, it has been a long process of editing and many meetings and trying to put everything together, and it was such a joy to read it, to see that how things went just the way that David and you and the rest of the team planned it. I'm really happy also to see the poems by Urayoán, Noel, and Sophie Maríñez. These are very well-known poets from the Caribbean region, the Hispanic Caribbean region. So that was also an added value to these two issues. So I just want to say thank you to you, Kevin, and to the team of Caribbean Quilt for making this happen again. I know that every year is a big battle to make it happen, but it's always a joy to read you.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Rodriguez. So with that, I will just wrap up on my side with a couple of things before we end the call, is just to thank the program as well for their support. So Professor Rodriguez and all of the Caribbean Studies faculty and instructors that have created an environment where students can create such incredible work. That's something that I'm really thankful for. As well as the New College Initiatives Fund. So we had Professor Goldstein, who was on, and as well with Jeff Newman, and all the work that they do, as well as the folks at the Writing Center that have helped to craft a lot of these pieces as well. Yeah, so the biggest thing that I take away, and I tell the students, and if anyone is interested in those statistics that I mentioned about seeing how many times your article has been read, that everyone's article, like it's been many views. that we now have. That David has helped set up that system. What's it called? JPS, the electronic system. David has set that up, done a lot of work with that, and it allows us to see those like analytics as well. But it also, I think, helps to boost, because David's doing a lot of work with like tagging and all this stuff, that there's been a lot of visibility of volume 5's pieces. So that's something that we can definitely share with you if you want. But the other part of it that I really enjoy is that it's democratizing the production of knowledge, that it's not just, you know, academic articles or book chapters written by professors, that it's students that are producing this really important work, and that you are the ones that are getting credit and being cited as well. And something that it's actually inspired me to look at a lot of my syllabi now that I'm more familiar with the journal and the process. And I'm gonna drop the link to the journal in the chat. If people want to go and look back at past editions, you can do that. Or also, if you wanted to make a submission, the call for papers is coming out soon. So if you want to jump the gun and do that, you're welcome to. But that's where you can go and look back at the past editions, and the new one is going to be up there very, very soon. But that is a chance for you to look at the work. And that's something that I'm incorporating into my own syllabi. Like I'm going through and actually saying, you know what, the students wrote probably some of the best articles on this specific topic. They synthesize it in such a clear and concise way, and in a manageable and accessible way, that really some of these topics are, you know, that will be my go-to material. And then that's not a lie. Because you've all seen some of the terrible journal articles that I've assigned in my class when I'm struggling to try and find the right way to do it. Now I can just say I'm going to default and go to the students' article because they say it much better. But yeah, so I just wanted to thank you all for your contributions to that, and also the feedback that I get as well from colleagues and other people just asking about the Caribbean Quilt, as David and the editorial team are doing such a great job of pushing that out. I also wanted to let people know that the new volume is going to be starting up soon. We're getting that, the groundwork is being laid for that right now. So please keep an eye out. If you are on the Caribbean Studies listserv, you will get a notification from us. We'll send out an email. If you are not and you would like to get in touch or to be added to the list, please let me know so that we can be in communication. But yeah, so there's going to be several positions are going to be posted for the Caribbean Quilt editorial team for volume 7, and keep an eye out for those. And that's going to be accompanied not long after with, or not accompanied with, but it's going to be followed by the call for papers. So this stuff is going to be happening over the break, and you know, there's different levels and different commitments and different opportunities that will be there with the different positions. But it's a great way to get experience, and you can work with an editorial team that has, you know, really done a lot and can pass on a lot of that knowledge and groundwork to you as well. And I also wanted to just shout out CARSSU as well. Thank you to Ray and Alyssa for letting us know about CARSSU. For those of us that, you know, sometimes you know, the student group, like I know that the events and everything like that, it's still kind of not settled yet, so everything is still kind of online for that, but creating this space within CARSSU as a place where students can come together and build community and sharing that work is really, really important. So thank you both for carrying that forward for all of us. And also the Diaspora Voices Conference is going to be back. So some of the presentations that were here, please consider you know, submitting a presentation for the conference. That will be happening again towards the end of the term. So all of that will be coming forward from the Caribbean Studies program. But with that, I would just say thank you to everyone. I realize it's 6 minutes past. It's a shame. But yeah, thank you all, to all the contributors, to all the faculty, to all the guests from the broader community. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And I wish you all a very, very lovely day. Thank you. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. So I'm going to stop recording, but